'cause your opinion don't matter.
Round 2, fight!
Kicking off the second phase of the Downscaling Chronicles, the Extron IN1606. These Extron Scalers are a little known secret to which I briefly touched on in the last episode, as all I could find were a few posts that mentioned programming a gbs-c to output 240p. So then, why aren't these units more coveted for downscaling? That's because the programs to make and upload the custom resolutions are only accessible to those with an Extron Insider account.
What a card block!
So I bought myself a gbs-c to try this out for myself, but it arrived defective. As custom Edid binary files can be uploaded using the Extron Product Configuration Software, or PCS, I looked for a more affordable scaler on the software compatibility list, and the gamble I took on the IN1606 paid off. With the ability to switch between 2 VGA and 4 HDMI inputs, it's going to be a 6 console downscaling gangbang. There's 3 ways to connect the unit to a PC: the front USB mini port, RS-232 with a Phoenix connector, and a LAN connection to your home router. The LAN connection was initially the only method that worked, but couldn't proceed without the password, which I tried all combinations of the serial number with no success. And what it needed was a hardware factory reset to negate the login password. And a big thanks to my paisano Lex Locatelli for pointing this out. Locatelli! You just need to hold down the reset button on the back until the LED flashes 3 times, then release and momentarily press once more. After the reset, it still required a password by LAN, but it now connects by USB, which took me straight into the program. I'll come back to the PCS window later, as custom resolutions are made with a separate program called the Edid Manager. I tried for hours to downscale the Neo Geo Mini 720p with no success using a passive HV sync combining circuit, until I figured out that the CRT would only synchronize with a powered DAC, either by an HDMI to component transcoder or an Extron 580xi to output C-Sync. Then it was just a matter of trial and error to program 240p. I tried many different horizontal pixel sizes, including 1920 by 240 that was said to be working in some of the online forums, and I had equivalent results with 1080 pixels wide by 240 high at 60 frames per second. Then in CE timings, I added all the common resolutions that devices like the Nintendo Switch will output, and skipping this step will result in only 480p being a selectable resolution for those consoles that perform the Edid handshake. Before saving the binary file, also ensure that audio is passed through. Back to the PCS program, upload the resolution in the Edid monitor tab, and assign it to one of the custom resolutions. Then navigate to the output and select the resolution for some sweet scan lines. So let's see what kind of lag we're dealing with. And thanks to LimeRain, who sold me a time sleuth so that now I can properly test 1080p downscaling. 1080, 720, and 480p down to 240p always had variable lag starting at 3 milliseconds and rolling back once it reached 20 milliseconds, which isn't so bad with at most 1.25 frames. A 480i input, however, was much worse, with 19 to 36 milliseconds, which is up to 2.25 variable frames. Downscaling is achieved by line averaging, so there's no loss of information. 1080 and 720p inputs appeared the same in their downscaling algorithms, so I wonder if 1080p is dropped to a common resolution prior to hitting 240p. Regardless, both look excellent and all the vertical lines remain intact. and 480 down to 240p had an even smoother field blending. And so far, I'm loving what I'm seeing. That is until I couldn't properly capture footage with my camera app. The Edid file and OSD show the output rate to be 60 Hz, just as I programmed it. On display is a direct screen recording from my camera, filming the Sega Dreamcast outputting 480p directly to the CRT, where I used the paid Pro Movies app to capture 1080p 60, and I reduced the shutter to try and match the frame rate. I can only get it as low as 62, which is why you'll see a rolling line in most of my CRT footage. But once I put the Dreamcast through the Extron Scaler, the lines roll much faster, telling me that the downscale is not 60 Hz. But if I reduce the capture rate to 50 frames and put the shutter to 55, the rolling lines from the mismatched video to shutter are almost completely gone. But this means that the 60 Hz video I feed to the Extron is having 5 frames dropped every second. And this is what throwing away nearly 10% of frames looks like. Frame stutter. In a controlled test, it's super obvious. Not just for 2D test patterns, but also motion video with scrolling text. And just to make sure, I used my Extron scan rate indicator, which showed the 15.7 kHz output, to hover around 56 frames per second. And to be triple sure, I also tested the RetroTink 5X's 15.4 kHz output, which runs as intended closer to 59 frames a second. Having messed with 240p custom timings before on the Courier 2 tvOne 750, I know the whole front and back porch can affect the vertical frequency, so I tried raising and lowering the vertical pixel size, but the output always lingered close to 55 Hz. So how's this gonna look in gameplay? Given that the Extron 1606 elegantly scales and blends the video down to 240p, it looks just as crisp no matter what the input resolution is. But when I display small text, I do notice that lower input resolutions are much easier to read. Although line blending preserves detail so you can read finer text, it would be great if the Extron could also output 480i, just like the Courier 2 tvOne 750. Back to the PC, I tried just about every trick in the book to output interlace 15 kHz. From 960i 30, 480 30, 240i 60, hell, even 120i at 120 frames per second, I just couldn't fool the scaler into outputting proper 480i. So it's stuck with a 240p output, just like the GBS Control, and let's see how it compares to some of the other downscalers. In Bloodstained Curse of the Moon on the Nintendo Switch, the Extron has more in common with the 2 line decimators on the right than it does with its line averaging cousin, the tvOne 750, as the Courier 2 straight up spills red lines where it shouldn't. And the slightly bloomed output of the Extron ain't such a bad thing when viewing 3D content. Compared to the RetroTink 5X, which screams decimation with jagged outlines of the character, if the damn Extron didn't mess up the frame rate, then I'd say it looks better than the 5X. To send the Nintendo Wii's 480p video into the scaler, I used one of those cheap component to HDMI analog to digital converters, which does an adequate job of signal pass-through. But when I first downscaled Mega Man 9, a 480i and 480p only game, I forgot to put the console into 4:3 to avoid the side letterboxing. And this was the perfect chance to test the Extron's picture controls. It's a shame that there's no physical dials like on the DVS-605, and all that navigation needs to be done through the already difficult to read OSD. With the front buttons, horizontal and vertical stretching and positioning is done 1 pixel at a time, and eventually I just gave up and set the Wii to 4:3 like I should have from the start.
My fingers hurt.
The picture controls move the post-downscaled video, so if some assets spill over multiple fields, there's no way to change the line offset. In the picture control menu is also a detail option to alter sharpness. Raising the value too high results in ringing artifact, and if composite video blending is your thing, then jamming the detail down puts the video out of focus, which I guess resembles blurry RF, but I prefer it at the default setting of 60. And unlike the Extron Super Emotions color banding and compression, the IN1606 displays colors rather flawlessly. No matter how I set the audio in the Edid file or in the OSD, I couldn't get any sound through the HDMI output. So analog audio will need to be extracted using a Phoenix block. Using the same scorecard that I did for the other downscalers, grading the Extron IN1606 out of 10, well, it only outputs 240p, but accepts 480, 720, and 1080p with just over a frame of variable lag. The downscaled picture is really superb, and I love the clarity as it preserves all the vertical detail, making it the sharpest line blending downscaler I've tested. But those frame skips are its biggest crux to satisfy full criteria for image quality. And although a little cumbersome, it does have full vertical size and position controls, so I score it a 7 out of 10. Programming Extron Scalers with 240p output using the Edid Manager and PCS software is still novel territory, so maybe more can be squeezed out of these units that go beyond my testing. If I could manage to get that clean 240p running at 60Hz, then this would be the GBS Control on roids. But in its current state, running only at around 56Hz and without 480i output, if this is its peak potential, then I'm putting the Extron Scalers as a downscaling alternative to bed. There's also one big hurdle to jump over, and that's the Extron Insider account. For obvious reasons, I can't distribute the software or help you obtain an account. And take it from me, unless someone else with better success can chime in, it's probably not worth the hassle. If you're one of the very few with the credentials and one of these scalers, then I'd recommend to give 240p timings a try, as your mileage may definitely vary. And if you're able to output 60Hz, then please let me know. Thanks all for watching, and happy gaming.